bones prophecy. Does anyone remember? Did anyone look familiar on Shabbat? That was the Haftarah for Shabbat.
Right.
Should have mentioned it to you. That was it worked out perfectly. We got to that chapter, and that was the what we read for the Haftarah. So what did we see there? How the prophet, God tells the prophet how the Jews will return back to nationhood again, from death to life, from being the exile, to return to a rejuvenated, alive nation in the land. But we saw there the two stages. The bones come together, the dry bones in exile, as if the nation is dried, has no hope of rebirth. Avdati Kvatenu, they say, our hope is lost. To be a nation again, how can that be? Doesn't seem possible, practically speaking. So 2,000 years in exile, dry bones, scattered, fractured. No signs of life as a nation. Individuals, yes, running, going, keeping the Torah, religious, etc. But as a nation, no national hope. And then the prophet comes and says, yes, indeed, you will come back. I'll bring these bones back. And we said we came a corpse, a skeleton, and then the sinews and ligaments, and then skin. And then we said a corpse, a dead body, but no life. And then the second stage, that says, I will breathe into the spirit of life will come into these bones, not just juxtaposition of the Jews back in the land of Israel, but the spirit of life, of unity, of the divine content revealed on in and through this living nation. So we saw more or less two stages, right? Delineated there pretty clearly. The first stage being the physical redemption, the second being the spiritual. The first, the return of the Jews back to the land, the building of the land, what the rabbis call Mashiach ben Yosef aspect, and then Mashiach ben David, the spiritual, which is what we read in the Haftarah, the two sticks that will come together, the house of Yosef, house of Ephraim, and Yehudah, and then ultimately unified. But again, as we saw, that was elaboration on chapter 36 in Yechezkel, how these stages of redemption will come in stages. For my name's sake, I'll bring you back to the land, sprinkling of pure waters of purification. It wasn't clear exactly the stages. The second prophecy in Yechezkel 37 was a more explicit, physical spirit, these days, the spiritual stage. But what does that mean? So now I wanted to look into a little what the rabbis talk about this first stage of redemption. What does that mean, the physical stage? The physical redemption. So clearly, again, the ingathered exiles, the Jews come back, ingathered from all the, like it says, I'll gather you from all the lands and bring you back to your land, to the Admat Yisrael, to the land of Israel. But there's room to elaborate more on that first stage and the beauty, the grandeur, and also to recognize what's going on today. So there's a chapter in Vayikra of the curses in Parshat Bechukotai. There's curses and blessings. It says, let's start, Bechukotai, that if you observe my statutes, my commandments, I will bring rain in the time, and the land will give its produce, and the tree of the field will give its fruits. Again, blessing upon blessing. There'll be peace in the land. You will lie down with none to frighten you. You will pursue your enemies. They will fall before you. Unfortunately, though, there's the other option, that if you don't listen, then I too will do this to you. And all these negative things, sign of you panic and the wasting away. You will be struck down before your enemies. Those who hate you will subjugate you. You will flee, will be none pursuing you. A list, unfortunately, of long curses. And even if, what? No, this is in Vayikra 26.
That's what Mount Gerizim and Mount, and curses and blessings and
no, no, that's someone else. Here, there's blessing, there's curses in Dvarim, in Kitavo, and these are the curses of what's called Vayikra in Bechukotai. So, 26. So again, these bad things, the land will not produce its fruit, and the tree of the land will not give its fruits, its produce. And if you still don't listen to me, and I will multiply those decrees, etc., going on, all these negative things. I want to read them all. Unfortunately, we've lived through some of them, and the sword, and you'll be eat the flesh of your sons and flesh of your daughters, things of such difficult times that the Jews don't. And I will put your cities to ruin, and I will make your sanctuaries desolate. I will not smell your satisfying aromas, the sacrifices. I will make the land desolate, and your foes who dwell upon it will be desolate. And I will separate you among the nations. I will empty the sword after you, and your land will be desolate. Your cities will be put to ruin. And then the land will appease its Shemitah years, all those years that you didn't put the land to fallow, following the laws. Now the land will, I said, you regain its, make up for those missing years. The land will rest and will make its Shemitah years appeasing. The rabbis say, interesting, on this verse, I'll pass out some sheets so we can share it together. You can see. On this verse, in the middle of the curses, there's what's known, right? The Sifra is what's called the Torah Kohanim, the Midrash Halacha on Vayikra. There's Midrashay Agadah, like more of the moral and spiritual teachings, learnings out from the verses in the Midrashim, Agadah literature. And there's also Midrashay Halacha, like the laws that the rabbis learned, not necessarily from the verses, but like connected the, like mnemonic device of connecting certain laws, the oral that was given orally, to the verses. Like the Mishnah is the oral law, but it was written and organized in a way of according to topics, right? Rabbi Nasi wrote the Mishnah according to topics, the laws of holidays, the laws of, right, the brachot, and the Midrash Halacha is not written according to the oral law according to topics, but the oral law, like from each verse, what can be learned or what was learned or what can be attached to, remembered through these verses. By each verse, what's the oral law, so to speak. That's called Midrash Halacha. There's the Mechilta, is on Shmot. Torah Kohanim, it's another name. The Sifra is Torah Kohanim, is on the book of Vayikra. Torah Kohanim, because a lot of the laws of the sacrifices in the Kohanim, and the Sifrei on the end of Bamidbar and Dvarim. So this is from the Midrash Halacha, from the Sifra, as you see in front of you. You have it in English, actually, so maybe I'll read it together. I will bring the land into desolation. That was the verse we read. Again, amongst all these curses, you'll be this, and scattered, and then I'll bring the land into desolation. This, the rabbis say, in the midst of all these curses, this is actually a midat tova, is a consolation, is a good trait, is a good quality, is a blessing in disguise. How? In that the children of Israel will not say that since the time we were thrown out of our land, our enemies have entered it and have found peace of mind there, that they'll build and settle it. In other words, you're exiled from the land, and not only that, but your enemies are what?
They can replace you.
Are replacing you. You built a beautiful house, and God forbid you're exiled from the house, you're in jail, whatever. But not only that, the double punishment is that your enemy, your arch enemy, is now in your new sofa, your new stereo, using your. He's not only that it's left alone waiting for you to come back. Now someone else is getting all the pleasure. You left this land that was fertile, etc. Now your enemies will come and take it and get all the benefits from the land. That won't be. This is a consolation. This is a good tray, a good tiding. Midat tova, like a good tiding. What? That even when you're in exile, that the Jews won't say that since we left the land, now the land is giving its fruits. However, your enemies who dwell in it shall be astonished at it. They'll be amazed at its emptiness. Here, the fertile land, what happened? We come to the land of Israel, and it doesn't respond. For even your enemies who come to the land after you will not find peace of mind there. The land will not give its fruits to the enemies that come after you. On that, the Malbim has, again, on the Midrash, the Malbim, on his commentaries to the Torah, when there's the Midrash Halacha, he brings the Midrash Halacha, and next to it his so to speak, commentary either shows the connection, how it's connected, or the explanations. So here he says, the Malbim, living, again, the last 100 and something years ago, modern, relatively modern, the classic commentators on the Tanakh, he's one of the more relatively modern. Vashimoti, I'll bring the land to desolation. Kishetiglumi mena, when you'll be exiled from the land, lo tishe'er b'kochav birkat. The land will not remain in its power and blessing. Rak tiyesh shmama, rather it will be desolate. The land will not remain fruitful when you're not here. Ad sha'umot shityashvu ba, so too that the nations that come to live there and to dwell therein, after you're exiled, lo yimtzu banacharua, will find no pleasure there. Like it says, Gofri Plamelach, Tzirfa Kol Artzah. V'amru Chazal, and our sages said, right, and from the Sifra that we just read, Shezot Tuvali, so this is a good tiding for Israel. Sha'aretz lo tosif tet kochal l'zarim, that the land will not give its strength and its power and its fruits to enemies, to the strangers.
So the translation we have is from the Malbim?
No, the translation is the Sifra.
And this is
the Malbim's commentary on the...
Is the Malbim alive at the same time as Machon before?
I'll look up his years. I don't have it here, his years.
Because it's essentially...
We'll get to that. We have more sheets. We have a little patience. We'll get to Mark Twain. We haven't had pictures today.
I think so actually once.
What?
Was
Right, the 1860s. Yeah, makes sense.
1960s.
So, but again, his commentary, he's just bringing down what the rabbi said in the Sifra, what you saw. The English you have is from the Sifra. So it says the land will not give its fruits. V'gam oivei him, even their enemies, lo yimtu b'chayfetz. They'll find no pleasure in the land. We came to a desert, a land that doesn't give fruits. What's going on? That's the prediction, so to speak. That's the prophecy. That when you're here, the land will be fruitful. When you're not here, the land will not give its fruits. Which doesn't make sense. I mean, if it's and you say it's an inanimate object, the land, if it's a fruitful land, whoever plants, it'll grow. If it's not a fertile land, if it's a desert, it won't grow for anyone. Here, the land knows its owners, knows who belongs to it, the land of Israel, to the Jewish people. When they're not here, it doesn't give its fruits. Again, it defies the usual laws of agronomy of what? You're right, it's the... but we'll see this life connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. As I always bring you the metaphor I made of like the two pieces of metal that conduct godliness to the world, this vehicle of goodness, of holiness, of justice, of truth to the world through the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Like two pieces of metal conduct. Plastic doesn't conduct. The Jews in America, non-Jews in Israel, it doesn't conduct, doesn't have this blessing, doesn't flow. Here you see the Jews outside the land. We'll talk about that side of the coin, what happens to them. But here we see the land without the Jews isn't alive, doesn't show signs of life, doesn't have its vitality. Only the two together. So like I say, we'll see two sides of this coin. That they're both interconnected. This life connection to the Jewish people. It's not we're supposed to make aliyah, it's supposed to live in Israel, it's a mitzvah, it's some external. This is the life factor of the Jewish people in the land that created such that together they are the vehicle of godliness, of goodness, of blessing to the world. When they're separated, here we'll see this side of the coin today, that the land without the Jews is not alive. What do you mean a land not alive? It doesn't show signs of its life, of its fruitfulness. The Ramban, living in the 1200s?
Yeah.
He, in his commentary to this verse, when it states, I will bring the land into desolation, is actually a good omen. Right? Again, he's bringing from the sages. And now he explains, it ensures the Jewish people that throughout their long exile, the land will not receive nor provide for our enemies. And this is a clear proof and promise. Here he's adding that this is like a proof and a promise from God that the land will not give its fruit. It's a dangerous thing to say. If it's not true, God forbid, if the Torah is how can you make a thing that the minute the Jews leave and the other enemies come and the land is fruitful? And you said it won't be. It's so to speak. God is... The certainty, the Torah is the actual truth. Here it's a proof and promise for the Jewish people. In other words, that we know that when we're here, we won't give land, and the certainty that is waiting for us to come back. As he says here, no land so fertile, it's not a desert, no land that's so fertile and built up has become so desolate and remains so. In his time, right? He came back to Eretz Yisrael. No, the Ramban. Wait, the Rambam came. No, the Ramban didn't come. No, the Rambam. But he's testifying at his time, that the land became so desolate. This is a proof of the Torah, the promise, also the promise of the future, that when we come back, it'll be fruitful again for us, as we'll see. For from the moment we left the land, now he's testifying, it did not accept any nation or language settlers, right? Living to be supporting a nation that could live here. Many nations, you could think, so no one came. Obviously, maybe if the Jews left the land and no one comes, so obviously it remains a desert. It remains desolate. No one comes to the land. But here he says, many nations have attempted to settle, right? His days, 800 years ago, 900 years ago. Many nations have attempted to come and settle the land and restore the land to its previous grandeur. Yet despite this, here he translates it, God does not allow their efforts to succeed, which is true, like you said, the hashgacha. But I think the Hebrew means, they don't have the power to do so. It doesn't mean Kel, the name of God. In other words, I think it means, I understand. If they won't have the power to succeed. They won't succeed. And why won't they succeed? Indeed, because of what he translates here. Because God won't allow them. In other words, the promise is that the land will not give its fruits. God will not allow it. It won't be. But this is a proof and a promise. A proof that indeed that's what took place since we left. And a promise, again, for the future, that we should know that we won't... It's not a natural situation. The land has to come back to and giving its fruits for the people who belong here. Because that's the life system. It's a condition for life. The land is not alive without the Jewish people. It's not a land like dirt, like everywhere else, that there's minerals and then it gives fruits to whoever plants and irrigates. But this is a land that defies that. It's not the usual. That's why it's called the Holy Land. They even call it Terra Sancta, whatever. The Eretz HaKodesh, the land of God. This is a land of godliness. It goes by different rules completely. Sometimes it looks the same. I'll read you what Rav Nachman writes once, Nachman Bresler. It looks the same as other places, the same dirt, the same land, but it's totally different. It's jewels. It's full of holiness and goodness and charity. And how do you say tzedek? Tzedek is justice. This is the land of justice, of truth that comes to the world. The absolute ruler of how you can define what is the standard for justice and truth. Also, a student of the Ramban, Nachmanides, Rabbeinu Bechaye, in his commentary to this same verse in Vayikra, and all the nations will attempt to rebuild it. Again, it's not something that no one came and obviously it remains desolate. But the nations will attempt to rebuild it, and they will lack the strength and perseverance to do so. This is a great omen, a positive omen for Israel, that the land has received no nation nor tongue from the time of the destruction of the temple, nor will it do so. That's a promise from God. In other words, the Torah testifies that it will not be, it cannot be. It will not, can't be, it can't live. It's a fact of creation, that this land doesn't live without the Jewish people.
All this amazing Palestinian history.
But we'll see. I'll read that also. But will await the return of its true inhabitants to its midst. The Hebrew is lo tekabel ad sheyashu efrocheha, until its true chicks, like little baby chicks that come back to the nest, that will not give its, waiting for the true babies, the true residents, the true inhabitants to come back to the midst. Also, in Rabbeinu Bechaye, the commentary on Breshit, not translated, but on your sheet, in Breshit chapter 17, the promise to the fathers, it was clear that God promised, Sha'aretz tiyeh lachuzat olam, it's a promise that the land will be an eternal inheritance to the Jewish people, Shelo yirashuha velo yoshivuha rakem, that no one will inherit it and no one will settle therein except them, only the Jewish people. V'im ulai yiglu, and if perchance the Jews are exiled from the land, you see that the Jews are not only not of Israel, sometimes they're exiles. What do you mean we'll only inherit the land? There is sometimes, as the Maral explains in the beginning of Netzach Yisrael, that's an abnormalcy. How do you say an aberration of reality. It's like a ball in the air. What goes up must come down. The Jewish people in exile, he says, if they perchance will be exiled, yashuvu eleo, they'll certainly return to the land. That's an aberration, that temporary can't be. It can't last. It's against nature, against the reality. So there is a temporary phenomenon, 100 years, 1,000, 2,000 years, but that can't last, that can't remain. The world has to come back to its normal state of fullness of perfection that God created the world for, to bring about the Jewish people in the land of Israel, to bring this blessing to all of mankind. So if perchance they're exiled from the land, certainly they will return to it, ki achuzat olam ilem, because it's an eternal inheritance, internal and eternal, this inner connection of life. Lolo matgot, not to the nations of the world. And Zehu Siman, this is a big sign for the Jewish people, that since they were exiled from the land, no nation has settled therein. Avalheim hi chareva, but she is desolate and empty. Ad shiashu, shu, like he said before, efrocheha litocha, until its chicks come back to the hen, back to their nest. That's the reality. That's the, so to speak, the Torah prediction, right? The Torah promises and predicts that when the Jews are outside the land will not give its fruits. So now you wanted to hear Mark Twain. So now we have a few quotes from that's the commentary. No, that's the commentary of Rabbeinu Bechai on the verse in Breshit 17:24.
Okay. This is the commentary. This is the different text.
Which?
The one you just read.
What I just read was the Rabbeinu Bechai.
Okay.
The commentary of Rabachia, some people say Rabachia, Rabbeinu Bechai on the Torah. The last two were his. One was his commentary to Vayikra 26, and one is his commentary on Breshit, when the fathers are promised that the land will be an eternal inheritance for you and your children afterwards. So he explains, again, he brings down that prophecy from Vayikra, that it's a good tiding for the Jewish people that it will not accept anyone. So now, historically, what took place actually? In other words, some of you have the back of the sheet here. Most of you don't. You want to pass this out? Another sheet. Since Shlomo likes Mark Twain, I'll read you. Mark Twain had a book he wrote. I have this edition from.
Do you have the other two sides?
This is from the book, The Innocents Abroad, or The New Pilgrim's Progress. Mark Twain, Collection of British Outside. This 1879 edition. And he describes what it says, a pilgrim's progress, right? A Christian, they had a pilgrimage, they came to the Holy Land, they went through from Syria, he describes the whole trekking that they made through from the north to the south, and then went to different stops he made on the way. In one place he writes, Palestine, again, we're talking about this edition, 1879. So we saw the prophecy and what the Torah says, but what was in reality, what was here, someone testifies of what he saw in Israel. Palestine sits in sackcloth and ashes. Over it broods the spell of a curse that has withered its fields and fettered its energies. It had energies, but you see that they're gone. Palestine is desolate and unlovely. Palestine is no more of the workday world. It is sacred to poetry and tradition. It is dreamland. Once was, but today, empty, dry, dead. Stirring things, another place. Scenes like these occur in this valley no more. There is not a solitary village throughout its whole extent. Not for 30 miles, right? No cities, no, like you just said before, people that were here he says, he testifies, there was not a solitary village throughout its whole extent, not for 30 miles in either direction. There are 2 or 3 Bedouin tents, he says, but not a single permanent habitation. One may ride 10 miles hereabouts and not see 10 human beings. To this region, one of the prophecies is applied. I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies which shall dwell therein shall be astonished at it. I will scatter you among the heathen, and I'll draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. He quotes that prophecy. Where's that prophecy from? Isaiah? Any other? Doesn't sound familiar? I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies shall dwell therein. That's the verse in Vayikra we've been talking about. He himself brings that verse, and says, no man can stand here by deserted in Malacha and say that a prophet has not been fulfilled. He says, here we see, I'm witnessing the actualization, fulfillment of this prophecy of Vayikra 26, of the curse, of the blessing in disguise, but for him, that the curse, that the land is in desolation. Here, no one can stand here and say that this verse hasn't been fulfilled. Another place he says, of all the lands that are for dismal scenery, I think Palestine must be the prince. The hills are barren, duller of color. They're unpicturesque in the shape. The valleys are unsightly deserts fringed with a feeble vegetation that is an expression about it of being sorrowful and despondent, etc., etc. Oh, there's nothing the eye rests upon, no pleasant hint, no striking object. It is a hopeless, dreary, heartbroken land. This is the whole land, desolate, given to weeds. I'll read you in a few other places that he writes. Now he says, the pilgrims took what was left of the hallowed route, and we pressed on towards the goal of our crusade, which was what? Renowned Jerusalem. Now he describes his approach to Jerusalem. The further we went, the hotter the sun got, and the more rocky and bare, repulsive and dreary the landscape became. There could not have been more fragments of stone strewn broadcast over this part of the land if every 10 square feet of the land had been occupied by a separate and distinct stonecutter's establishment for an age. Just full of rocks, like stonecutters. It's just rocks and rocks and rocks. There's nothing here. There was hardly a tree or a shrub anywhere. Even the olive and the cactus, the fast friends of a worthless soil, had almost deserted the country. No landscape exists that is more tiresome to the eye than that which abounds the approaches to Jerusalem. Now you know, right, the road to Jerusalem, beautiful green, the mountain hill. The only difference between the roads and the surrounding country, right, the road itself and the surrounding country, perhaps, is that there are rather more rocks in the roads than in the surrounding country. That's how he describes the approach to Jerusalem. Different places he describes how.
So he wrote like a book or something? Or?
This is a book. This is The Innocents Abroad. It's a famous book. The Innocents Abroad.
To Tel Aviv, or what road did he take?
From the. Where's he coming from? Yeah. Probably from the. Only one direction here. There's no dew, no flowers, no birds, no trees. Here he talks about different parts of the country. So this is what I quoted to you from there.
In those days, there weren't many roads.
I'll read you maybe. So we have the next quote is from another book. Another book by no nation has been able to establish itself as a nation in Palestine up to this day, wrote Professor Sir John William Dawson. No national union and no national spirit has prevailed there. There are people that came, like he said, there's a few Bedouin tents here or there, but a nation that can live and survive as a nation and its own independent agriculture from the land, and also with no national spirit. The people that got their food, they're living up here, but the people that got their vegetation, everything from outside the land, it wasn't a thing that had supported a nation. The motley impoverished tribes which have occupied it have held it as mere tenants at will, temporary landowners, evidently waiting for those entitled to the permanent possession of the soil, that they themselves felt that they were living on time, so to speak, knowing that the true owners will come, which they say is also written in the Quran.
He had Europeans owning land at this time?
Okay, but even those that came here. The Midrash says that there was no king in the world that didn't want to place, how do they say, a foothold in the Holy Land of Israel. They were people that tried to.
Started the railroad.
The Germans,
the old railroad,
Kaiser and the Turks.
But this railroad here that went from Turks, they started in
Turks,
from Turkey, right? From
and they the Baldwin engines. We take that little train.
From Malta. I live next to the old trade line.
Yeah,
okay.
They started in 18.
The Germans built it for the Turks. They're allies in World War I. Okay.
So this is from, again, the name of the book is Modern Science in Bible Lands. This Professor John William Dawson. He wants to show how the Christian, how the Bible is truth in the Bible. I think he talks about Noah's Ark, how they found the different evidence. But here he says, you see that the land that never established, as a nation, no other nation ever established, no national entity, no national spirit in the land of Israel. You can read the book of From Time Immemorial, from Joan Peters, who came to investigate how the Jews, what did we do? We threw away indigenous nations that were here, living here. We came from Europe.
This is still the Dark Ages, right? I mean, they didn't have electricity.
No, this is 1888. Wow.
They had candles then, right? They didn't have electricity then, did they?
No, but I'm saying he wrote
Running
that.
water on the Dark Ages.
No, but Joan Peters, in recent times, a famous and important book from time immemorial, how she came as an investigator to see how the Jews, threw out all these indigenous people and population. And as she was finding and researching, she found the opposite. That after the Jews came, and then after the Jews came and made all these, opened up economic and opportunities, then came in all the influx of all the indigenous Arab population. But it's all statistics. She brought the book. She came with the opposite opinion to try to show that we're the bad guys, so to speak. We exiled other people, and she said the conclusions, all the facts. It's a whole thick book of
What's her name?
Joan Peters, From Time Immemorial. Thick book, whatever. All references, whatever, like research. It's all. But how they came afterwards, statistics, how they turned out. Tov. But you see, the land was exiled. I'll give you some certain also figures, facts and figures, from another book by Shmuel Katz. It's in English. The translation here is The Jewish Presence in Palestine. When Jewish independence came to an end in the year 70, the population numbered by a conservative estimate to be 5 million. Josephus said there are like nearly 7 million Jews in Israel. Now I'll jump to 1738. He said the writings of travelers who visited Palestine in the late 18th and 19th century are filled with descriptions of emptiness and desolation. In 1738, Thomas Shaw wrote of the absence of people to till Palestine's fertile soil. There was no one here. In 1785, Constantin Francois Volney described the ruined and desolate country. That was before Mark Twain, 100 years before that. It was empty, desolate. He had not seen the worst. Pilgrims and travelers continued to report it in heartrending terms on its condition. Almost 60 years later, Alexander Keith, recalling Volney's description, wrote, in his day, the land had not fully reached its last degree of desolation and depopulation. In 1835, Alphonse de Lamartine could write, outside the gates of Jerusalem we saw indeed no living object, heard no living sound. We found the same void and the same silence as we would have expected before the entombed gates of Pompeii or Herculaneum. A complete eternal silence reigns in the town, on the highways in the country, the tomb of a whole people. The land of Israel was a grave, was dead. No nation, no living people, no tomb of a whole people. And then he brings Mark Twain, the few quotes that we saw. By Volney's estimate, in 1785, there were no more than 200,000 people in the country. In the middle of the 19th century, the estimated population was 50,000.
Went down from 250,000.
Okay, and then he talks about he gets to the Arab numbers and the figures. I'll show you some pictures of this desolation, what it looked like a little bit. And as the Jews started coming back, there's an interesting book here, just with a lot of pictures, Coming Home to Zion. And it describes actually the Aliyot and the Bilo and the different attempts to come back and what it was to come. Like you guys got on a plane, came to Israel. What it was to come here on the boats and the trying to get to cross the borders illegally and to get here and what it was. The land was. So I'm going to skip the descriptions. So it's really heart-rending, and they're dying, and the malaria, and they sold them land, but no one. The land was, how do you say? It couldn't be cultivated. They sold them land that was either swamps or nothing you could do with it. But they made it. They turned into it. The Jews came, and all of a sudden the land starts coming alive. He describes here the. Anyway, let's look at the pictures that you can see more. Here there's a picture of here, if you can see, in Afula, 1920. Those who can see, there's just little tents they put up. It's all just rocks, empty land, just rocks here. Totally here, just rocks. This is the way to the new settlement, 1922. Not too long ago, 100 years ago. But it's all rocks, just like where are you going?
I lived in the kibbutz not far from the kibbutz. And one of the grandmothers said they came from Berlin after Hitler came. And like for years, all they did was just take rocks out of the field.
Okay.
Just like,
This picture, again, if you're far away, I'll show you later, you can't see probably. There's a guy with some sheep here grazing in empty land. This is Rehov Ben Yehuda, one of the busiest intersections in Jerusalem. But it was not too long ago.
No road, no rail, no bus.
No. But what you have on your sheets, I think, if you see the bottom picture there, I don't know if you can see it. You have that. That's this picture.
Where is it?
This, you can't tell where that is. You should have bought this little these weeds. This is Dizengoff Street. You don't recognize it. Had you bought a little plot of land, this dirt here, the sand off the beach here, just weeds growing, nothing, empty. Dizengoff. The beach is over here. Dizengoff.
That's the only building.
10 years?
No, it doesn't give the years for this picture. Here also, if you would put up a tent here, this is now Ben Yehuda and Allenby in Tel Aviv.
Wow.
This weed itself is, anyway. But look what it became. Look, and then they started building in Rehov Rothschild. They started building houses and roads, the same place. And then now it looks like a city. But it wasn't always that way. This is when the Jews came back, all of a sudden. What I want to talk about maybe is the other side of the coin. That's the promise was, the curse, unfortunately, or the blessing in disguise, that the land will be desolate when you're not here. So I'll just read you what you don't have yet, maybe next week. I'll pass out the sheet. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, in the prophecy of Yechezkel 36. It says, there's the last chapter in Sanhedrin, Perek Chelek, it's called. Every Jew has a portion to the world to come. And it talks about things of the future, the world to come, and the Mashiach. And then there's, it says there not to give predictions, not to give dates or when the expectation of the Mashiach. Because then the dates can come and go and people are disappointed and then lose faith and say, oh, you see, this is the rabbi said this and this date and nothing happened. The truth is that it's not that nothing happened. It could be that there's levels and levels of existence and certain things took place. First of all, certain maybe in this world took place that were the keys to like instruments at beginning of stages of the future goal. You're expecting some bombastic total redemption. Things took place that you didn't even notice that are instrumental in the foundations for the future redemption. Or, as I said, at different levels of creation, of reality, that something started to fall, the coin starts to fall on other levels until it finally gives its fruits and we see it in this world. But things actually took place in that date. But if you give dates, it's dangerous not to give dates and not to give signs and predictions. And right after that, the Gemara says, V'amar Rabbi Abba. But Rabbi Abba says, Ein lecha ketz megula mizeh. There's a sign you have no greater revealed redemption than this. This is the Gemara in Sanhedrin 98. You have no greater. So here he does give a sign. After all that, you're not supposed to give dates and predictions and so on. Here, but there's one sign. He says, yes, I'm going to give a sign. You have no greater sign of revealed redemption than this. For it says in Yechezkel 36, Vatem harei Yisrael an pechem titenu, v'perichem tisuli ami Yisrael ki karu elavo. That you, mountains of Israel, shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people, for they are about to come. In other words, the sign for the final redemption is what? The land becoming green, giving its fruits again. You'd expect, the sign of redemption when everyone's religious, when the Beit HaMikdash falls from heaven, when, when there's hundreds of yeshivot, the Torah starts. The sign of redemption is when the land starts giving its fruits again. It's very, anticlimactic, whatever. That's the sign. That's what we're hoping for. Again, that's the first sign. of the revealed redemption. There's other unrevealed redemptions. There's other stages, like I said. But the Rabbi says here, Rav Abba says, this is the sign of the revealed redemption. And now it's already clear that you have a sign that breaks through the surface. Rashi says on the Gemara there, when the land of Israel gives its fruit ba'ayin yafa, with a good eye, not a cactus here or fruit here, but when the land starts giving its fruits, that's the end is the final redemption is near. And you have no greater revealed redemption than this. So that we'll talk about next week, the significance of this sign, why this sign, why such a banal with some materialistic sign of redemption. They're waiting for something spiritual when everyone recognizes God. Or this is the most lowly thing that you would have expected to be the sign of the beginning of the redemption. But also understand what's the significance of the fruits. As I said, it's not, some people don't recognize it, so we take it for granted. The land gives its fruits, it's all green. We go to the Machon Meir here, every store is full of the selection of fruits and vegetables.
It's the land welcoming the Jewish people.
So that's the thing. It's just, so even if we do recognize it, we tell us you're right, that the blessing that the land, again, is giving its fruits. But to understand that it's spiritual, ethical, metaphysical, the ramifications of this first sign. This is the first sign, like the tip of the iceberg, with now returning the neshama of all of creation, the divine ideal in its totality of uplifting and raising all of creation to what it's supposed to be, this total ideal. The neshama is now setting down its first footsteps, its first, setting up its receptacle to receive that neshama. Just like individual, first grows the body develops in order to enable that neshama, the spiritual inner content, to be revealed.
The land is also like Moshe ben Yosef.
But the land of this first signs of the physical side is the first stage of Mashiach ben Yosef, yes. But I'm saying the significance is not that it's one stage, but it's in other words, it's a stage, but understanding that that's the beginning of what? It's the foot of this giant entity. It's the first stage of the foundation for that the neshama is now returning. The goal of all of creation is now starting to show up and return to its full expression. So the appreciation isn't that we have stage what we have. It's without a fruits now. I appreciate it. I do recognize it. I don't take it for granted. We have more fruits to eat. It's an amazing thing. But those fruits are just, like I said, the tip of the iceberg. The majority of the iceberg right underneath is what's behind it, what's coming through here. That just means that what's starting to now reveal in the world is a new era of creation, of existence, of mankind. Bezat Hashem, we'll talk about next week.